out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back, so let's root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
Welcome to Let's Get To, the baseball show from the fans' perspective. Now here's your host, James Christopher.
Oh, and welcome to Let's Get To. I am your host, James Christopher, and we have a great show for you today. We are going to answer Don Gillingham's big question of where in the world is Andy Tomczeszyn? But on Sunday, things seem to get better. For one, found out that I am, in fact, and have since had the second dose of the vaccine. My wife is also getting the second dose of the vaccine, so it starts to feel a little bit more normal. And we had spring baseball. And I can't tell you how good it did me to see friends of mine who, even though they root for different clubs, just excited as a collective for spring training, supporting each other, being friendly. There was a gift dance-off at one point, and it was just fun. And it was really what baseball should be about bringing people together, particularly when, it's just been so rough for going on a year. Like, we're almost exactly a year from when I found out I wasn't going to spring training. We found out 2 days before we were supposed to fly out that it was like, nope, not going to happen. So it was a great day on Sunday to see a lot of that happen. However, something did happen on Sunday, and it got me thinking of, and this will be the first time this movie is quoted on the show, Major League 2. And there's a scene where Willie Mays Hayes, coming just off his movie role of Black Hammer, White Lightning with Jesse the Body Ventura, played admirably by Omar Epps. I have spoken before, at least on Twitter, that I think the movie's a better movie with Wesley Snipes in it. No offense to Omar Epps, but he hits a home run. And if we remember Major League, he did push-ups anytime he hit the ball in the air. And Rube says, wow, Willie's really got some power. And Lou Brown says, yeah, if a guy will be bagging groceries next week. Guys, don't get too high or too low on the first 2 or 3 spring training games. Don't get too high or too low off of any spring training games. I saw a guy Yankee fan, who had posted someone who was like, based on on Sunday's result, they're not winning anything, and they're in this and that. I think you can't take anything from preseason football. I think you can take even less from spring training baseball. I think you need to look at health, look at, are they hitting the ball hard? Are they, for the most part, throwing strikes? But you certainly cannot take anything from that first week. We're so excited for this season. I think we're even more excited for this season because we needed to feel more normal. Miles Straw for the Astros talked about just having fans, even though it was like, 1,500 people, which was a sellout at reduced capacity. It just felt better and felt normal. We want that too as fans, but we still have to remember that this is a game that builds out and only reveals itself after months of playing. Where we can reflect on the 2020 season and how weird it was. And if you look at, again, for the Astros from the perspective of the team I'm a fan of, under 500 in the regular season, a game away from going to the World Series by the time they got to the playoffs, because of that's the nature of baseball. They really weren't getting hot until the playoffs started. So we have to remember results, definitely in spring training. And one of the co-hosts of the show, Andy Tomczeszyn, will tell you results up until Memorial Day just don't matter. And so just be excited for the game to be back, to hear the crack of the bat. Listening to Robert Ford call a baseball game was just awesome. Be excited about that stuff because it's back. And let's worry about where our teams are going to finish when we do go from May into June. That seems like the best thing to do. And again, in 2020, we're coming out of 2020 and things still feel weird. I think anything we can do to keep some degree of sanity is definitely the best thing. So as I've often said in my life, when in doubt, listen to Lou Brown.
This just in. News from around the baseball diamond.
So we're back here and we have breaking news from our favorite ball team up there in Normal, Illinois. Matt Durkin is back from the Corn Belters, but also to talk a little KCL. So Matt, you're back. What's new?
So we're pretty excited. We announced our 4 KCL teams this morning. We're just really looking forward to this summer. It's had a lot of great feedback and probably like the 2 hours we've announced the first team. So we're really excited.
Yeah, let's go through that because I love the fact that there seems to be a little bit of everything in these new identities. And I want to start with what I think is going to be my favorite one, and that is the Blue Caps.
Yeah, so obviously Illinois played a huge part in the Civil War 150 plus years ago. And we've had a lot of great people come from the state, from Lincoln to Grant, that played huge roles in it, along with the 250,000 plus soldiers that came from the state. So the Blue Caps kind of just plays homage to them, and we're really looking forward to it. The feedback about it's been great so far.
Have you done uniform designs on them yet, or are we just at a logo so far?
So we do have uniform designs on that team. They're going to kind of look like the old Houston Astros jerseys with a blue and red and gray tint to it. So they'll be pretty cool.
You know you're speaking my language, right?
I do know.
Am I allowed to give you money now for that, or do I need to do that offline? I'll do it offline.
So the Bobcats have been around, so probably from maybe the 60s or 70s. There were a little bit of a stretch where they were non-existent, but Mike Brown, who's kind of commissioner of the Kernels League, he brought them back in the maybe 5 to 10 years ago at this point, and they played in the Midwest Collegiate League, and with the pandemic shutting their league down as well, they kind of came to the KCL last summer, and they're here to stay. So we're happy they're back in the building.
And they're here to stay. So you guys also are using an animal that I've only seen one other time, and that is the sloth. I've only seen it one other time in another pod league in Sugarland. So tell me a little bit about the ground sloths.
Yeah, so the ground sloths, they're now extinct. They were one of the most commonly found mammals during the Ice Age period. And we just did a ton of research, and no one's really ever done anything about a ground sloth. So we're kind of excited about them. We'll see how the public reacts to them later this afternoon and moving forward. But they're an insane animal. They were 13 to 17 feet tall.
Whoa.
Razor sharp claws that could rip apart trees and protect themselves from predators, and they're about the size of an elephant. So very intimidating thing. I can only imagine walking next to one, whoever it was, thousands of millions of years ago. But we're really excited to see the public's reaction to them moving forward.
And then the last one, what do we have finally?
Yeah, so the last one is the Howlers. That was actually going to be the first team that we kind of decided would be in the league this year. It kind of has a coyote and wolf feel to it, and just reaching a different audience with the outdoorsy and kind of living life on the wild side and adventure sort of mindset. So those are the 4 teams, and we're really looking forward to seeing how they come out this summer.
I love it too. 4 very distinct looks that all feel very minor league baseball in the best possible way, reflecting the community. And you know as well as I do that minor league baseball is a large underground of people that just collect gear. When can we start getting our hands on shirts and caps?
They'll be available in the next weeks to months. We're getting some final mock-ups on all the merchandise now, but we should have it pretty soon.
Well, he is Matt Durkin. We know him from talking about normal Corn Belters, and now he's talking all of the teams from the KCL, and we're going to have you back on in a couple of weeks. Man, this has been an exciting week to talk a little bit of the Kernels Collegiate League. Thanks so much, and I can't wait for the reveals for the rest of the logos.
Lights, camera, play ball, inside baseball cinema.
So welcome back to Lights, Camera, Play Ball. We are talking about the movie Bottom of the Ninth today. Stars Joe Manganiello. I know I got his name wrong. Most famously from True Blood, and then Sofia Vergara, most famously from both Modern Family and Machete Kills, which is a movie that should be talked about more and more. I dug the movie. So the synopsis goes, after serving 17 years in prison for a violent mistake he made in his youth, a once aspiring baseball player returns to his Bronx neighborhood. So it's a focus on the low minors, and it is very much a true baseball underdog story. What makes it different is it isn't a movie about sort of being a misfit and overcoming. And it isn't like The Natural, somebody surviving something tragic in their life and overcoming, or, being too small, all those things that we're used to seeing. This is a movie about someone who makes a mistake, and it's the gravest of mistake. And the way they paint the picture of this guy who, when he was 17, killed someone, serves his time in prison, and then has to deal with all the things that come with getting out of prison while also trying to make a baseball career happen. It really worked for me on a lot of levels. I thought that it was really well acted. I think the baseball was photographed well. And I think that you get a real... it's a very gritty movie, and you don't always see that in baseball movies. A lot of them, are kids from, Iowa. It's in Iowa, or The Natural in it's sort of like a rural sport. The grittiness of New York really comes through. The pain the guy is in for what he did wrong, in how he kind of lost everything. I just like the idea that it's a guy coming back from a mistake, something he did wrong. He is a victim of his own toxicity, and how the game works in that and helps him overcome that, or at least starts taking steps to overcoming all those mistakes. Again, I thought the movie was great. I definitely will rewatch it over and over. I rate it a solid triple into the gap. That's how we're going to rate movies on the show now. Either a strikeout, a single, a double, triple, or a home run. I give it a triple. I definitely will revisit it in the coming years. The only thing I did like about the movie is that Joe and I are the same age. We were both born in 1976, and he looks like that, and I have trouble getting out of bed in the morning.
Who's on first? The Let's Get To Local 9, brought to you by Zoomer Sport.
So we're excited to be joined by Alan Miller of the Portland Pickles to talk about Pickles baseball and something else they've cooked up. Alan, first of all, we almost have baseball. How you feeling?
I feel great. I was just watching some spring training. It's yesterday, first day of spring training. Sure felt great. This is the best time of the year.
Absolutely the best time of the year. And, it looks like, at least we're hoping for what seems like it's going to be a regular baseball season, maybe not in attendance, but at least you guys being back in your home park. Is that the plan so far for the Pickles?
Yeah, that's our plan. We've had some great conversations with the governor's office, as recently as today. We've created an alliance with Team Oregon Alliance with the other two Oregon teams in our league, so the Bend Elks and the Corvallis Knights. So we are working together with putting all the information and all the protocols together. And, for an on the field, I think we're full steam ahead. And, we're also optimistic we'll have fans. It may be less than we want, but we're going to continue to grow as hopefully the whole situation gets better.
That's the thing, is I'm really feeling, and everybody I'm talking to, you included, feels like it might start off weird, but it might end closer to what we view as normal.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, we are on this really interesting precipice right now of the next 3 months, being this incredible optimistic time. I think that, just comparing it to what we had to deal with last year, there's a little bit more clarity in that, what people are out there playing. I think spring training starting with fans was huge. And I think for us, I think it's just a matter of seeing it. It's if you haven't been out of your house in a year, it's a really striking thing to be around fans again. It takes a second to get used to it. But I think once you get used to it, when you go to a game and you start to see it on TV with fans, we all know what we're missing. And I think people are open to doing it safely and being like, I'll do whatever I need to do as long as I can get out there. I'll wear my mask. I'll sit apart from people, and the experience will evolve.
I'm just excited to get a picture with this guy again.
He's ready for you. He's been out at spring training all weekend. He's been watching some Mariner games.
He's getting ready. I love that. That's awesome. But you guys aren't just doing Portland Pickles baseball. Something exciting with the Gherkins. I've got the hat here. Tell me a little bit about that part of it.
Yeah, well, last summer, we started, the Wild Wild West League. And it was because, the West Coast League wasn't playing. So we basically needed the Gherkins to get out there. We had the Gherkins ready to go. We had the Pickles ready to go. The Gray Wolves is someone else we work with. And, and at the time we had the Westland Knights. So we had a really great experience with this. And we wanted to continue to make sure that the Gherkins had great competition as well. So we have 2 new teams entering the Wild Wild West League. We have the Willamette Wild Bills. And then we also have the Portland Rosebuds, which is an incredible story that we really wanted to bring to life this year.
Well, tell me a little bit about the Rosebuds, because first of all, just from a branding design, gorgeous.
Well, thank you. I mean, this was a bit of a long process for us. We've been working for a couple of years, and we really, we worked with, Rob Nyer, our commissioner of the league, who's a great historian, and just trying to figure out what did this team look like? What did they do? What happened? So we've kind of been sounding the alarm about, hey, there was a Negro League team that played in Portland in 1946. It was owned by Olympian Jesse Owens. It's an incredible story that sort of was lost to history. So we've kind of gone back and we've tried to find as much as we can about it. And just by even talking to people, we've found a lot of other cool things, where they played and some other documentation about them. So we're still kind of going out there and finding as much as we can. Without having those jerseys and all this art, we kind of went out there and created our own interpretation of what we thought it would be and what it would look like. So we've got some shirts and some hoodies, excuse me, and we've got some great hats, some great new era hats that I think all my fellow crazy merch people will be really excited about.
Yeah,
it's a good collection.
But talk to me about that. I mean, because you guys are doing it, and serendipitously or sort of coincidentally, the Kansas City T-Bones rebranded the Monarchs, which is another really famous. Like, how important is it for us to remember this whole piece of baseball history that honestly they wanted us to forget at the time?
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I think it's interesting for our generation. I'm just saying, growing up as a baseball fan, I didn't know anything about it. And I think that the Negro League Museum and MLB has done a really good job of starting to expose what this is. So when you start to go back and be like, oh, wait a minute, you're telling me that all the best major leaguers are playing in this league and not Major League Baseball. Oh, that's really weird. So, and then you start to really get into the story and understand, like, this league very well could have been better than Major League Baseball at the time. And, what happened to them? What happened to the players? And, of course, some of them went on to have incredible careers in Major League Baseball, but a lot of them didn't. And actually, when you start to hear about the struggles and what these guys did to, build teams out of nothing and compete and go on the road, with the issues they had to deal with, it was incredible. So I think just from an educational perspective, the more of this we can bring to light and like, hey, this was a team. They tried. They were out there working hard, and, they didn't succeed that year because mainstream media would not give them the attention, and they had a really hard time promoting what they were doing. So there were a lot of things that was incredibly difficult for them. And I think if we can kind of just bring some of that visibility back to the struggle they went through and all the things that that happened during that time, I think that'll be a good win for us. And, I think it was really serendipitous that the Monarchs did the same thing, being in Kansas City and doing all that. That was an incredible rebrand for them. They did such a great job. And, and I think that I think we're all starting to see it at the same time. I think we're all starting to see these arguments and discussions about, well, should they be in the Hall of Fame? Should these stats be real? Like, how does that work with you? How do you integrate stats and all those things? And so once you start to see that happening, then I think we all, the floodgates will open, and you'll start to see more and more markets being able to support and showcase those teams.
I think especially with the crossroads we were at in 2020, and I think, we've had filmmakers on, African-American filmmakers who are big baseball fans, who will openly say, look, they don't care that I'm a fan. Like, they're not going after me. I think it's incredibly even more important that you guys are showing just that's really been a historical practice of baseball, and we need to fix it. If we want the game to keep growing, we have to fix that.
That's right. And I think knowing your history is really important to move forward in the future. And, so the fact that a lot of us don't know our history is is something that needs to be fixed for us and for future generations to understand what happened and how we can be better people, and how we can improve the game and make the game better.
One of the things I was very honestly proud of you. We've only met in this format, but I think you're one of the best people in baseball that I've met, and an innovator. And you guys, and also the people in Normal, Illinois, found that pod thing was more than just a way to get through, but a way to really grow the game. What was some of the advantage you found of housing 4 teams in one league, kind of like what they're doing with the Kernels Collegiate League? What were some of the benefits that you think the fans will get to experience?
Yeah, it's a really interesting model. I think it's something that, especially in our time where we're really a bit travel challenged, it's a really interesting place to be. The advantage, really, I think people really underestimate the value of a good rival. I think you underestimate that if for a fan to be able to know more about more teams makes them a more intelligent fan. The more it's not a bad thing to see the same team more than once a season or twice a season. Oftentimes, I think it's great because you really start to pull into the strategy a bit more of the game and understanding what certain guys can hit, what they can do, and it makes a better experience as well. So I think there's a lot of people that have sort of, you don't want to play too many teams many times, but I don't really see, as a fan, I actually think the opposite of that. But really what it's done for us and a lot of things is it eliminates a lot of the costs that are it's just too expensive. I mean, you can have travel ball teams doing a lot of things because they charge their players thousands of dollars to do that. But from a level that, from a wood bat summer league and college league, there aren't that many options for what we wanted to do was to create that sort of minor league system. And I think we saw that work really well. We have a player who played on the Gherkins last year who was the MVP of the Gherkins, and he's going to be on the Pickles this summer, which is incredible. So it really gave him an opportunity to showcase what he could do coming from a smaller school, and now he's going to a bigger school, but also, the coaches saw him and said, we need this guy next year. And same with the Grey Wolves. We have a player on the Grey Wolves who was outstanding last year, and the Pickles said, we want that guy. So he'll be on the Pickles this year as well. So, I think having a localized scouting and having the ability to bring people along that way is great. I think the real challenge in a lot of these baseball systems is there is no obvious, well, if I get on this team and do well, I can get to this team and this team. We have to build that system, and we're fortunate that the Portland area has so many great baseball players, and baseball is a big priority, in the state of Oregon.
Again, you're one of the biggest innovators we've ever talked to on the show. That's a genius idea. Alan, tell me, where can everybody find all the information about the Pod League and about what's going on with the Pickles this year?
Well, you can go to portlandpicklesbaseball.com to get all the pickle stuff. Our schedule's up now. We'll be announcing promotions and all that good fun stuff in the next month or so. The wildwildwestleague.com. You can get all the information on the Rosebuds, the Wild Bills, the Gherkins, the Grey Wolves, and all that good stuff. So between those two sites and our socials, there's tons of information, and we'd love for everyone just to dive in and find your favorite, team and root along with some terrific merch.
And now, Goodwood, knocking around the majors with Andy Tomczeszyn.
So we are here with Andy Tomczeszyn on our new segment, Goodwood. Andy, first of all, how does it feel to know that people actually asked where you were last episode?
I mean, it's good from a FBI missing person standpoint. I'm not going to appear on a milk carton anytime soon, but if I were to, it's good to know at least what 3 people would ask about where I was. None of those are related to me, by the way, if that tells you anything.
Well, yeah, there you go. That means either A, your relatives don't listen to the show and therefore didn't know you were gone.
Or they're guilty.
So what can we expect out of this show? What do you think? I mean, or this segment in particular?
You mean beyond puns about wood for at least the first few episodes?
I suspect we'll go 37 episodes. I used the number 30.
You'll get at least 30 puns about wood.
Yeah, I used 37 on purpose. My Kevin Smith people know how it relates to the Goodwood pun. Anyway.
I think for me, where this segment might differ, one of the things I respect about your platform in this show, and I'm so appreciative of being on, is the fact that we do tend to look at the more positive side of the baseball community and the baseball culture as it stands, whether that is minor league baseball, independent baseball, affiliated baseball, collegiate baseball, or even my segment, which is going to deal primarily with Major League Baseball. Where I'm going to depart a little bit is I don't have a whole lot of positive stuff to talk about when it comes to Major League Baseball. So I think that I can bring a little bit of my personal real world, real job experience from a labor negotiation standpoint, because that is going to be the key topic and really what the lens everything's going to be viewed through for this year up until and through December 1st, when the CBA expires, and potential work stoppages and all the other bad things that could potentially happen after that.
So then let's get into the episode. So on your Twitter, you describe yourself as being a full-time curmudgeon.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, yeah, with all the positivity and you were part of it too, everybody just excited about spring training. Let's talk a little bit about that kind of axe that feels ready to fall on baseball's head.
Well, as I just said, the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement between the players and the owners, expires on December 1st. If you've been paying attention, and I assume everybody here has, there's been a lot of movement from an ownership standpoint, dealing with the machinations of Major League Baseball and trickling down to the affiliated clubs, which we now have to make this huge differentiation on, because that group went from 160 plus to 120. I think a lot of the things that Major League Baseball ownership did during that activity, and a lot of the Machiavellian machinations that they made during those negotiations, up to and including even the COVID-related negotiations that they had to make with the players to get a season played for 2020, were a testing ground for the CBA. There's a whole lot of bad press that's going to come with this, and I don't see, me personally, I don't see a way that a work stoppage is going to be avoided, whether that is late this season when it just looks like there's no hope, or immediately after December 1st going into the 2021 or 2022 season.
One of the things we never ever discuss on this show with any a great amount of depth, is Seattle Mariner baseball.
Are they an affiliated team or independent? I forgot.
I don't even remember anymore. They probably will get contracted if they don't get their act together. But, we all know, you and I are Astros fans, and we know, and I think you agree, I believe that the real reason that George Springer was not keen to give a hometown discount had nothing to do with any trash receptacles in 2017, but actually had to do with the service time manipulation. With the Seattle Mariner, I guess he was the president, whatever he was, outing the fact that that is something people just do as opposed to something we all suspect, is that going to make this even harder to get a deal done?
Oh, absolutely. And you're talking about Kevin Mather, who on February 5th made his last official action as president and CEO of the Seattle Mariners, because he resigned that next morning. Basically spoke to a Rotary Club in the greater Seattle area and talked about a couple of things, one of which I think got bigger headlines immediately because it drives into the cultural zeitgeist of race relations right now. He was very critical of Latin American players who didn't immediately understand English, and how they weren't able to negotiate contracts. They weren't able to even speak to him the way he wanted to be spoken to, and that he held that against them. That's what got a lot of the press. The bigger issue, the bigger thing he brought up is he actually confirmed, to your point, what everybody already knew happened, but now you have a major league executive saying, oh, yes, we absolutely do this. And not only do we do it, but we threaten players with it, is service time suspension. And that is keeping players in the minor leagues longer than they potentially need to be kept in to control them for greater periods of their prime playing years. And George Springer is a great example of that, because it's long been suspected that Jeff Lunau kept Springer in the minor leagues for at least one more season than he had to get his prime years. So Springer, instead of hitting free agency at 28 to 29, hits it at 31, which means the contract he just got from Toronto is likely the last big contract he's ever going to sign. Whereas you look at somebody who did not have that happen to them, Carlos Correa, who is going to hit free agency at age 27. So likely he's going to get a 5-year contract, 7-year contract somewhere, but still have some back end where he could sign yet another contract should he want to. And that you're messing with players' livelihoods. And when you're talking about a giant industry that makes billions of dollars, although it, if you listen to the owners, it's less and less every year. It's just petty. But now you've put, the front office of the Seattle Mariners in a position where they have to refute that ever happens. And that was just Kevin Mather talking out of his hindquarters. But now you've put the GM of the Mariners in a position where he's going to have to keep a outfielder, Jared Kelenic, on the major league roster, or else there's going to be a player grievance because Mather identified Kelenic as an individual that he is actively suppressing. There were a couple of others, but that's the big one. So you've got a 21-year-old guy who's going to be playing in the outfield for the Mariners who basically has to open the season as one of their starting outfielders because otherwise there's going to be a player grievance filed. And that player grievance only strengthens the arguments that the union is going to have when they come to the negotiation table later on this year. That was huge. I think the Players Association, and I'll read the quote, highly disturbing yet critically important window into how players are genuinely viewed by management, not just because of what was said, but also because it represents an unfiltered look into club thinking. To a club, to the owners, the players are fungible pieces. Some are more valuable than others, but they're all replaceable.
Right.
And so how you treat them long-term doesn't really matter. And I think your better franchises are better at least navigating how that feels. But some franchises, obviously, like the Mariners, who honestly haven't been a respectable, competitive club in over a decade, and you wonder why players leave the second they're eligible for free agency. Well, that's why. Because they know that nobody's got their backs, and they have to go get their own. And it's not unique to the Mariners. Like I said, they're worse at PR, but the Astros are guilty of it. The Yankees are guilty of it. The Dodgers are guilty of it. Everybody, all the teams are guilty of it because they're all sitting there saying the same thing. And it's not just a bad look, but it is a bad beat for Major League Baseball as an organization to have to overcome in what is going to already be a contentious year. One of their own just gave them gave the opposition ammunition for that negotiation.
It does seem like this is just another long line of, we talked to anybody who's watched Ken Burns baseball knows that just because free agency became a thing, there was still collusion amongst owners to not sign free agents. This sounds just like another way of billionaires using lawyers to figure out a way around a system they agreed to.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, ultimately when I'm in a really bad mood where I see this going is the owners taking their ball and going home and basically blowing up Major League Baseball. And that wouldn't mean that there's not Major League Baseball at some point, but I think it has the potential in the next 5 years to look dramatically different than it does now. And I think the first thing you saw with that is how they dealt with the minor league affiliations and the minor league teams and all the changes that were made this year with no input from the minor leagues. From things that were structurally unsound to simple things like dumping the Texas League name or the PCL name and trying to match them up with divisions in Major League Baseball. So we now have the Pacific Coast AAA division. Okay, but how does that work for Major League Baseball? Well, I think you start talking about revisiting things like radical realignment. And if, the PCL doesn't matter, or the Texas League doesn't matter, which has been in existence for 120 years. Well, why does the American League or the National League matter? Why don't we just have baseball? And why aren't the Mets and the Yankees and the Red Sox in one division and we go with that? Why aren't all the California teams in another division? And that stuff matters. It matters to fans. It matters to communities. You've seen what's happened to communities already just with the lack of a promise of a baseball team. And there are still 62 plus teams out there trying to 42 plus teams out there trying to figure it out and what it's going to look like. You're going to put major league markets in that kind of bind at some point. And I see it going down a really rough road.
And it does matter. I mean, you and I are Astros fans and we've been in the AL now for almost a decade or maybe a decade, but it still feels weird, right?
Mm-hmm. I still would, I looked at the schedule as it came out, and I'm still irritated that we're playing the National League West rather than the Central Division. But, I can make that argument too, that I grew up playing the Dodgers 100 games a year. It felt like the Reds 100 games a year. In my 20s and 30s, it was the Cardinals. That was who we were, or the Cubs. That's who you're always going against. It's still odd to consider that, whether Twitter likes it or not, we have a rivalry with the Yankees.
Yeah, no, that's very weird. As we kind of get close to wrapping up the segment, then I mean, obviously, we're going to get really into the weeds and a lot more daily or weekly MLB stories, and you still will be on Go Astros at least once or twice a month. But let's keep looking at the CBA thing. You and I have already lived through a strike, and I am naive. I think I'm definitely more naive than you are. I really believed both parties in 95 when they said it wouldn't happen again. How much of the same playbook are we going to see? Is it still going to be, we're not making enough money, we're not going to open our books? I mean, how much of it is just going to be 1994, the sequel?
I think the owners have no motivation. And the argument against work stoppage is always there's too much money at stake. I think the owners are very dug in based on what we've seen over the past 12 to 24 months, that they're okay with losing money for a while if they get their way ultimately. Because they know ultimately TV is going to bail them out, right? So if they have to forego part of a season, well, they just did that last year. They can't afford to do it indefinitely, but I could certainly see a situation where we're not picking up baseball in 2022 until May, June, July, if that means the owners get their way. The players don't, it's always the problem. Players don't ever have a lot of leverage because ultimately it's millionaires against billionaires.
Sure.
And the TV contracts are on the billionaire side. So that, adds more fuel to the fire there. I think if the owners continue to misstep the way they have, public sentiment, which already is not in their favor, is going to be even worse. And ultimately, you're talking about the potential death or certain, I don't even know the word I want to use, destruction, dissolvement, something, reduction of the impact that Major League Baseball has on our culture, which is good for the independent leagues. It's good for the minor leagues to some extent. But you referenced the Kid Burns documentary. Baseball is a huge part of the American culture. And if you take it away, if you diminish it, it comes back in another form, but it's not the same.
But it's not the same. I think when you watch all of this stuff unfold, it does seem like we're going to be doing the exact same thing. And you mentioned the press, and you and I I think have similar views of how Jim Crane seems to not have cared what his fan base endured with the fallout of the sign stealing scandal that he sort of let his fans kind of deal with. Do the owners care how they're viewed by Major League Baseball fans? Or they just figure we'll come back because we're thousandaires. We're not even millionaires.
Oh yeah, the fans will come, and the fans they care about are not you and I. The fans they care about are corporate ticket buyers. Corporate ticket buyers will continue to buy tickets because it's something they can take clients to do, and it's almost a zero cost because you can, under certain tax schemes, write off the expense of those tickets. So it's a way to entertain clients and get future business. It's considered an investment. And as long as you mentioned Jim Crane, you look up at Minute Maid Park and you see those, I think, 6 or 7 community leader boards. Those companies pay a lot of money for those boards to advertise.
Uh-huh.
So as long as games are on TV and I can see and I'm just making one up because I don't even remember who's up there, the Halliburton logo, that means something to Halliburton enough that they're giving maybe $250,000 plus every certain period of time to have their name on that board. It's not just because they're super nice guys in the way they wage war with contractors in foreign countries. That's a whole other topic. It's because they're paying for the advertising. Where it becomes a problem for the owners is when that advertising dollar starts drying up. Tickets are great. Advertising and TV is where they make their money.
Okay. Well, then let's wrap it up with this then. You still, for as much as you have a very, I think, realistically doomy or gloomy view of the future. You still hang out, you still hang on every pitch, you're still very much involved. So what has you at least excited about this 2021 season as we go forward?
I want to get back to playing 162 games, playing a full season. Going to a ballpark would be cool because didn't get to do that it's been over a year since I've been in a major league ballpark. And that's always going to be something I enjoy and want to experience. And I'm always going to support my home team, at least the players on that team. I don't have to like the ownership. I mean, you grew up in Houston of a certain age, you're an Oilers fan, and I guess that applies to being a Texans fan now. You don't have to like the owners. Nobody likes the owners. Nobody liked Bud Adams for decades.
Yeah.
To your point, to your example, which drives your dad had access to those guys, and he decided he was a Cowboys fan instead. I mean, so you don't have to like the ownership, but at some level you do have to like the product they put on the field, which usually is the players. And so players will come and go, and players will be who you get attached to. And I'm excited to see from just a pure baseball fan standpoint, some of the great stories that come out, the young guys that come up and get a shot and surprise everybody, the old guys who are trying to give it one last try, not to be too poetic. I'd love to see if Verlander's serious and can come back, August, September timeframe and pitch if the Astros have something to pitch for, because I don't think he's back next year. But I think there's a lot of teams that have a lot of good things to look forward to, and baseball's fun, and the rivalries are fun, except for with Arlington, which is just a choke of a franchise, a city.
Forever.
But other places are great. And I don't know if you're a baseball fan, how could you not be excited what they're doing in San Diego? Even if you hate Trevor Bauer, how can you not be excited about the pitching staff that the Dodgers have put together? The Yankees are going to be strong. You've got up-and-coming teams in the Midwest. The White Sox are telling everybody they're going to win the division and win the World Series, even though they haven't beat the Twins in forever. The Twins are great. The Cubs and Cardinals are going to be competitive this year. So there's just a lot. The Marlins look like they could be, if they build on last year, could be a surprise team in the East. So there's just a lot of strong teams.
The Blue Jays, yeah.
And I like the idea that the balance seems to have shifted a little bit to be more even towards the National League in the last year or two. Whereas you looked at 2017, 2018, all of the power teams outside of the Dodgers were in the American League. So it feels like that's evened out, maybe even gone a little bit back to the National League side.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that it's going to be fun to watch. And as always on this segment, we'll do our best to kind of, keep the on-field stuff separated from the business part of it. That's the way to stay sane. So, Andy, that was some good wood.
Oh, and, one more thing about good wood, because it'll always lean a little bit to the left. I'm going to try to find some stories. I told you there'd be one in every segment. There's always going to be some lean towards the weird. We're always going to look for something weird, as John Miller used to say, weird, wild, and wacky. That we're going to look for some of those things as well.
That'll be fun. I can't wait, And I do want to give a real quick just to understand, the color guy for the Astros, Sparky, Steve Sparks, when he's usually on play-by-play, his home runs are often good wood, and that was, I think it's inspired. We will talk to you next week.
The Minor League Mind with Jess Knaster.
So we're excited to jump back into the Minor League Mind for the first time this season. Jess will be joining us at a minimum at least twice a month. And Jess, when we left at the end of season 2, the disarray was starting to kind of make some degree of sense. Now I think we have a pretty good idea where it is or what it is. So what is it?
Well, so it is what it is something that largely resembles, and of course the it being the future of all baseball that is not Major League. And I couldn't come up with a great name for that umbrella, but it is the umbrella that on top of that little pointy part, that's Major League Baseball. Everything else is underneath it. And so what it is largely what we expected it to be from the original reporting of the fall of 2019. The teams that were thought of to be on the list, most of them were the ones that ended up losing their affiliations. Thankfully, most of them have found homes elsewhere, and that's kind of, the next few weeks look at it, because it's a show unto itself, I think, if we really dive into everything. But at least in terms of minor league baseball, that's even just affiliated baseball, that's enough. But what it is molded from clay by Rob Manfred and the owners of what they want developmental baseball to look like. And for everybody else, it's going to take some getting used to, but ultimately it is being crafted in the way that Major League Baseball wants it to be. And it'll remain to be seen over time if it's good, if it's bad, if it doesn't make a difference.
So let's talk about, I think the first question on everybody's mind, because I think a lot of people are just waking up to the story, which is probably how Major League Baseball got away with it, because nobody pays this degree of attention. You, me, and like 7 other dudes that don't own teams paid attention. 43 teams basically lost the game of baseball musical chairs. How are they all shaping up, and what does their future look like?
Well, so 40, going from 160 to 120, and yet 43 teams lost their affiliation. That requires some math that, that unto itself, and really through the whole process of this, you mentioned that we're not owners, but we pay attention to it. It's amazing. And I think only because of the general blissful ignorance, and not willful, but blissful ignorance of the inner workings of minor league baseball, that has added to why this was so not easy, but why this was able to take place without more of a fight. But ultimately, it's and then going back to the 43 teams, it's because 3 teams from independent baseball came in, and then there was shuffling all throughout. But basically, as it appeared, the 120 our major league teams got to pick who they wanted. And because there was no contract in place, like that's something to remember, is that the professional baseball agreement expired at the end of September. And then it was Major League Baseball saying, well, we have no contract. Here's what we want to do. Yeah. Let's do it. And so major league teams got to pick who they wanted to affiliate with. And by and large, and only by, a single margin, the narrowest, are the majority of teams, major league teams, completely unchanged in terms of who their affiliates are. At the very least, these were affiliates that were in their system last year, because then you get into the intricacies of it. This is the whole Steve Kornacki at the board with the khakis bit of, what used to be short season is now low A or high A in some places. And so these teams moved around. Anybody who had a team in the Midwest League, which used to be low A, and anybody who had a team in like the Florida State League or the California League that was high A, but they had each of those, they're now swapped. So 16, it can get convoluted, but really at the end of the day, 16 of the 30 teams have new affiliates, and 14 of those 30 are unchanged from before, and at the very least, just one new affiliate in that grouping of 4. So that's kind of the baseline of how it goes in terms of the teams that don't have a seat at the minor league table. There's been rumors of, if Major League Baseball is going to go to 32 in a couple of years, then they might need some of those teams back. Yeah. And as of now, only 9 of the 43 don't have a place to play baseball, don't have a league to play baseball in 2021, with only 3 of those either outwardly announcing or just kind of quietly folding up shop and ceasing operations altogether. So that's
and those 3 are the Charlotte Stone Crabs. Now the Florida Fire Frogs, they kind of went out of business, and that was sort of that was kind of known really in some circles for years, that they just were not financially sustainable, and the Lancaster Jethawks. So in Charlotte and Lancaster, is baseball dead?
I cannot speak specifically, or at least not as well, to Port Charlotte, Florida, as I can Lancaster, because for the next day and a half, that's where I still am. But with the Jethawks, there's a really nice ballpark here, and unlike Florida, the Fire Frogs, whereas their ballpark, they didn't really have one. They played in a couple different places in their last couple years. And as I understand it, in Port Charlotte, they had an older ballpark as well. Lancaster has a really nice stadium, one of the best in the former California League, maybe future again California League. And they lost their affiliation because it believed, never got the official word, but it was believed it was because of the weather, because the wind blows out pretty constantly to right field, straightaway right field, and that it's hard to develop players, both pitchers and hitters, for inflated number reasons. Even though elements exist all over. So, but with that never changing, I don't know how much how likely a team is to come back to Lancaster, because that's not going to be any different. The wind is going to be the wind. The Copa identity for the Lancaster Jethawks is El Viento de Lancaster, which is the wind of Lancaster. Yeah. So it's embraced here, and that's just what it is. There's a local radio station that has a spot where they say, come to the Antelope Valley Wind Festival on from January 1st to December 31st. So that's just something that's not going to change. And so, there's talk that they might, because the ballpark is city owned, there's talk that the ballpark might become something else, revamped into an amphitheater or some other outdoor event venue of some kind. And then, of course, probably, there's no going back. But yeah, I think there is the chance that baseball as a professional option may be dead in those three communities.
And you don't see an option for particularly Lancaster for the collegiate summer league model or independent, just nothing close enough.
There are two leagues in this area, or two leagues that have footprints in this area. One summer collegiate and one, independent. But since the ballpark is city owned, I think really what would need to take place for that is that, and this is the case with several other communities as well. Several of the 9 who are, looking for somewhere to play in 2021 and beyond. The city owns the ballpark. So if the owners want to stop operations and somebody else wants to come in and say, let's try this league or let's try this league. Got it. They have to work with the city, and the city has to be willing to do it. Like the mayor here in Lancaster, one of his first reactionary quotes at the news that the Jethawks were not going to be receiving an affiliation from anybody in Major League Baseball for 2021 and potentially beyond is, well, at least we'll get to save $400,000 a year in field maintenance. So if that exists elsewhere, you run into the same problem of, do the owners want to incur the costs of all ballpark operations? Because it is different everywhere, but that is a very real thing that teams will have to deal with if they want, new ownerships would have to deal with if they want to try and resurrect a given community in minor league baseball, affiliated or otherwise.
Yeah, that's definitely a gloomy picture. I guess just to round it out with a little bit of happiness, you are getting ready to move. What are you excited about as far as joining the Senators?
Well, the whole Eastern League, at least that's the name it was, and the AA Northeast.
We're going to talk. We're talking league names your next visit, because that's a whole ridiculous thing we got to get into.
But so that whole league has, I think, some really good history. Some of the longest tenured partnerships. Talking affiliations in minor league baseball. The Senators have been with the Washington Nationals organization since 1991, when they were affiliated with the Expos, and there are a few others in the league that have had lengthy partnerships with their given team, with their given parent clubs. And so I think that really helps to strengthen what the community can be, because Harrisburg is about 2 hours from Philadelphia, and so would inherently be a Phillies city potentially, but is also 3 hours from Pittsburgh, so that could be there as well. And yet, who the Senators affiliated with? The Nationals.
The Nationals, yeah.
So I think you find that in all little pockets, like and say like. On the other end, Portland, Maine has long been affiliated. The Sea Dogs have long been affiliated with the Red Sox, And the Northeast, especially New England, is Boston anyway. So that's no different. But I think you find more rabid fan bases. You find maybe stronger partnerships because there is so much in the way of proximity to your parent club and then being able to live in a given area. And then if you get a chance to go see one major league game a year, take a trip into the big city, you might be able to see a former player who you saw up close. Maybe they lived in your house, and now they're playing Major League Baseball, and that really, I think, is strengthened by the proximity of it all. And just to be in a new community is exciting to myself and my wife, because we've lived in a few different minor league communities, and really one constant is they love their team, and that passion is infectious. And we are looking forward to being a part of the Harrisburg community, and hopefully falling in love with the community just as they love their baseball team. And then by proxy, they love us because we're part of the baseball team.
Well, we love you. This is Jess. We got a lot more for the Minor League Mind coming up this season. Thanks, man, so much for jumping on, and good luck on the move. We expect lots of photos as it goes down.
The 6-day drive starts on Wednesday, March 3rd, and ends when we get there.
I'm having a very Oregon Trail moment. Y'all have a good trip.
Thank you. No rivers to ford, thankfully.
Go Go Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball.
So we are very excited about this edition of Go Go Astros. We are visited by Mike Acosta, Astros historian. We had originally recorded this for our National Hat Day episode, which is why you'll hear that referenced. But we decided in the edit to hold it off till now so we can present it in its entirety. Even if you're not an Astros fan, it's a great insight to a history of a ball club and what goes into tracking that history. We all know that baseball is all about its future, but it's also about its past. And I love this conversation so much that I hope you enjoy it. And again, thanks, Mike, for coming on. So we're excited to welcome to Let's Get To Mr. Mike Acosta. He is the historian for the Houston Astros. And Mike, first of all, I've got a great office, but you have got a great office. That's sweet back there.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I got some, I've been collecting for a long time. So I got a lot of my prime Astrodome related items in my home office here.
It's funny. I was thinking about the dome the other day because I can remember as a kid, I pretty much grew up there, just how big it got in the horizon when you got close and you knew you were getting close to the dome. It was such a special place for me. And I know that you were working on a dome paper model. Is that correct? How was that all going?
Well, I serve on the board of directors for the Astrodome Conservancy. And so that organization is charged with coming up with a plan for redeveloping the Astrodome. And that's something that I've been doing for a number of years just on my own, and kind of going through and seeing what actually works, what is the best use for the building, and how we can re-energize it and really open it up to a whole new class of Houstonians, who have either moved here or were born, before or after, the dome stopped, was not being used for baseball or football or rodeo anymore. So it's a wonderful building, and we've done a lot of projects with it. I'm still working on a lot of projects, and just trying to move forward with it.
Again, so much. I would probably do anything to see one more baseball game there, just to soak it all in, because I've watched so many old videos because I got old. One of the things that's interesting, and this is an anecdote that you won't care about, but I'll tell for the audience. I was deployed to Bosnia during the height of the Killer Bees era. And during that deployment, won an Army Commendation Medal. And my sergeant major is pinning the medal on me. And rather than give me these words of encouragement that a senior NCO gives to a young private, was telling me that the Astros were nothing and would never win anything in my lifetime. What is it like? I mean, as you've sort of gotten involved and have worked through all this Astros history for as long as you've done it, there really is a lot of history to this team and a lot of great moments in baseball that happened with the Astros.
There is, when I would say the Astros were an expansion team. The 60s produced, 4 expansion teams, with actually more than that. But, it was during a time period where, we took a back seat to a lot of the other cities, even New York with the Mets. They took a little bit more prominence. They had Casey Stengel, associated with the team in the early days, and the Astros were a very youthful team, but something that an organization that was based on the future and innovation, and just a different type of mindset of doing things different and trying to set a path that really had never been done before. And that was the mindset of the Astros, and that's why they were called the Astros, and why the Astrodome was developed the way it was, and the way it played out. The Astro name is short for astronauts, but it's the spirit and the meaning behind all that. And so, we've gone through several decades now where you would say, well, what's an Astro? And you say, well, it's short for astronauts. Well, you think of a Houston Astro now, and you're thinking of Jeff Bagwell, you're thinking of Craig Biggio, Nolan Ryan, Jose Cruz, Jose Altuve, in the way that you would think of what's a New York Yankee. That's Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle. We have several decades, under our belt now where we do have a significant history. And even before, say the 1990s, you get to a team that's, close to 30 years old, 20 some odd years in the 80s. There were so many interesting stories that went along with the Houston Astros. And it's really this way. In a lot of respects, it's this way with many other teams too. If you look at Montreal, if it's San Diego, Anaheim, a lot of these, Milwaukee, just these other teams that maybe you kind of consider don't get the same respect as some of the other clubs because of the history behind the teams. There's always an interesting story, but Houston is very unique. And it's mainly because we built the Astrodome. It's mainly because we had AstroTurf. We did everything indoors. We did something that had never been done before. We had the rainbow uniforms come about in the 70s, and just a really, really against the grain type of franchise. And not that there's anything wrong with that. There was a lot of great players and fun players that came along, and a young franchise that was finding its way and kind of navigating through some ownership issues and then some financial issues in the 70s. And then, some commitment and some stability in the 80s with John McMullen. But, and then of course with Drake McClain and Jim Crane later on. But, the Astros always had, in my mind, as a kid growing up in Houston, I was always very curious. I would hear these little, first of all, I was always hearing about Wrigley Field, Yankee Stadium, great cathedrals of baseball. And I would see the games on TV. You would see the Yankees on TV, or you would see the Cubs on WGN and even the Atlanta Braves on TBS. And my day during the summertime would be filled a combination of going outside and playing and then coming back in and seeing some baseball. And it always looked different. It was a different experience because these guys were playing out there in the sunshine. Yeah. And then the Astros would come on at 7 o'clock or 7:30 and we're inside the Astrodome. Or I was going to the game that night and we're in the Astrodome. It's totally different. But I had a lot of curiosity about that. Why were we different? Why, what prompted Houston? What was so special in Houston? Why did we have all that? Why was it so different? Why was the experience and the storyline different? And so there were a lot of fascinating personalities involved with the development of the team. A lot of great stories, a lot of great, big wins for the city of Houston and the surrounding areas in Harris County and the counties around and the rest of the state, actually, in Louisiana, Arkansas, all the surrounding areas for a very long time. But I was just very curious. And so as a kid, I wanted to know. It's very easy. I can go look up in the newspaper. I could find a media guide and look up how many home runs, Jimmy Wynn. Jimmy Wynn was before my time. I was more in the era of Jose Cruz, Nolan Ryan, Joe Niekro, Billy Doran, in the late 70s and into the 80s. But you know, when you want to look at the history of a team, you can always go, and now it's so easy, you know, with all the websites and all the Twitters and everything else. But you know, back then there was no source to go to except the library. And so I was very curious. Okay, I can see how many home runs, and I can read about Jimmy Wynn, and I can see what he did on the field and how many games the Astros won in a certain year, or what kind of difficulties they had as the Colt 45s. But I really wanted to know, why were we called the Astros? Why did we have the Astrodome? Why did we have AstroTurf? What all of this, the big encompassing story was fascinating to me. And so I did a lot of research. My mom would take me to the library. She worked downtown, and we would go to the library, especially during the summertime.
Yeah.
And spend some time there. And I would look at the microfilm and you know, the photographs and some of the books, you know, that were. I remember the day that I found that there was a biography on Judge Roy Hoffines, and
Yeah.
you know, as a little kid, I did who this guy was. But when I opened up that book and, you know, started reading and started looking, and like I said, I'm a kid. I mean, I was.
I'm trying to think. You like 7, 8 years old?
Maybe in fourth grade.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I was maybe like in fourth or fifth grade when I started doing this, and you know, I started reading about these different personalities, Ari Bob Smith and Craig Cullinan and George Kirksey, and find out who these guys were that were basically unheard of at the time, unless you really knew your history. And so those guys became heroes to me, just like the ball players on the field, because if it hadn't been for them, you know, we would not have any Houston Astros, and we never would have had the Colt 45s. And then all these wonderful players that have come through town would never have had an opportunity to entertain the fans and play and accomplish some great things. So I always thought that the Astros had a very fascinating story, just because of the unique quality of how they came about. So anybody who came and said, the Astros didn't have any history, well, you know, maybe they're just basing that on just pure win percentages, and you know, the Astros you know, had not been in the World Series and had come close, you know, and this and that. But I think when you look at a public trust like a sports franchise, you know, you look at pride, you know, we cheer for the guys who wear the right color clothing, you know, so to speak, that represents us and as a community, and it's a good spirit, you know, and so I think that, you know, to detract, for someone to detract from a franchise simply because they haven't won a World Series at the time, or, you know, maybe they're only 2 decades old, you know, that's whatever.
You know, it's funny because it's our National Hat Day special, and I'm a graduate of the University of Texas. And so I believe that the Longhorns wear burnt orange at home and white on the road, and they don't wear anything else. Conversely, the Astros, part of their tradition is really being on the cutting edge of uniform look. How important was that early on for the team? You know, the shooting star jerseys, for example, the rainbow up here, then the blue and the gold. How important was that to the team to always kind of be looking forward as far as their look on the field?
Well, you know, with the Colt 45 insignia that they had, the gun that won the West and would win the National League was the slogan by Bill Nieder, who was the insurance salesman in Houston who won the naming contest. And the colors that were associated, the navy and orange. First off, there's been a lot of talk as to where that navy and orange came from. The orange was a favorite color of Roy Hoffines, but it was also a dominant color of where Paul Richards came from with the Baltimore Orioles before coming to Houston. And then the blue color that was mixed in there was meant to look like a Texas sunset or a Texas sunrise, is what was relayed to me. And so they wanted something that would go with the Western type theme. And so you think of the old West movies, and you have the broad wide angle shots with the sky and everything, and the cowboys on the range, and so to speak. So that's kind of where that came from. But it also matched extremely well when they went with the astronaut in space theme when they changed the name. It was always very important with the ownership, especially with Roy Hoffines and the look and the appearance and how it was going to, I think the shooting star had movement to it. We saw the open star in the late 90s with the gold star, kind of an open end star.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted that movement in the original shooting star as well. And that was something that was a signature. And Alan Shepard, the astronaut, was one of the deciding factors in renaming the team from the Colt 45s to the Astros. And it came down to the stars and the Astros. And, with Astros being short for astronauts, and the space program taking off, he really liked that. He told Roy Hoffines that would be his choice. And so that's what they went with. But, you have to also understand with uniforms and appearances and where baseball was in general by the early 70s. Roy Hoffines had a stroke in 1970. He was incapacitated for a while. They appointed some other people to kind of, he was still there. He was still very alert, but he no longer was involved as much as he was. This is a guy who the Astrodome was his palace. And so he was involved in everything. Now he let the baseball people run the team. I talked to some of the former players before, and I used to ask them, how was he visible in the clubhouse? And he wasn't. He was more concerned with the operation of the Astrodome and then what became the Astrodomain when they built Astro Hall and Astro World and the Astro World hotels and creating a destination place for people to come to that area. But when he had his stroke, it also was the beginning of some financial difficulties for the Astros in the early 70s. And by the time they got to the mid 70s, the creditors had kind of taken over and controlled the team. So, you had Ford Motor Credit, Mattel that was involved in there. And so they were kind of running the team. So when you get into the 70s, you also see the advent of, or the larger emergence of color television. And so not only in Houston did we see the rainbow uniforms, but you saw, green and gold uniforms in Oakland. And you eventually saw those gold uniforms in Pittsburgh, and Baltimore had some orange uniforms as well, but those were solid uniforms, one kind of a monotone uniform where they primarily had one color. And what the Astros did, leading into 1975, was completely different, because you had shades of, two shades of orange, you had yellow and red, and you still had the navy in there, but it was a different look of what was supposed to be a shooting star going across the lower torso, and then the Astro name on top.
Right.
So it was something that was bold. It was something that they wanted, where no matter if you were watching, because if you're still watching the game on black and white television, there was going to be no doubt that you were watching the Houston Astros, which, instead of shades of orange and red and yellow, you were going to be seeing a grayscale shade and these different colors of gray across these stripes. And then the dark star that was on the uniform. So it was something that was, I think, was born out of trying to do something different because the team was not doing that well financially.
Right.
The Astrodome actually needed a lot of attention at that time. It became, the rainbow uniform just became something, what I call the DNA of the franchise. From that point, I think that as much as I really, really love the shooting star, and I think it's a very good logo, and it was a very good looking uniform, and I love it. The current uniforms that the Astros wear now, it was sort of born out of that original uniform,
right?
With the orange, and blue, and the way it's trimmed out a little bit. It's scaled back a lot more simpler than the shooting star uniform, but with that rainbow uniform, that distinctly became Houston, just like the pinstripes became for the Yankees in New York. So it was something that really made it so when you thought of Astros, you thought of orange hats and rainbow uniforms. And that's right about the time where I started going to games in the late 70s as a toddler, and then I walk in there and I see, this bright AstroTurf field and the lights on the scoreboard across the outfield and the different color seats. And then the guys on the field are wearing these uniforms and these hats. And it was just a cool atmosphere going in there. And then of course you had the variations, and the variations of the rainbow uniform over the years was based on the ownership. And that's usually where the uniform changes are really born from, is from ownership changes. And when John McMullen took over in 1979, and then his first full season was in 1980, first off, he wanted to introduce a different version of the rainbow uniform, which was what became the Sunday. And actually they started wearing a variation of this on the road and it was more of a gray scale, kind of an off-white jersey that had the Astros on the front. They were wearing this uniform actually on October 6th of 1980, which was the day that they clinched their first ever division title. And they won the NL West against the Dodgers in game 163 because they had to have a 1-game playoff. They were a little too confident going into LA with a 3-game lead. They wound up losing 3 games in a row. So they were tied. And so they had a 1-game playoff, game 163 on October 6th of 80. And this was the uniform that they were wearing. And this was the first alternate version of the rainbow uniform. And it had the rainbow stripes on the sleeves, which were a little bit different than the full body rainbow. You had navy, and then red, and then orange, yellow in the middle, and then on the other side, orange, red, and navy again. So you had two stripes of those colors, except for the yellow down the middle. And then that became the pattern that extended. I mean, that became so identifiable. Yeah, that look with the rainbow uniforms, whether it was on the shoulders or if it was across the front, it became so identifiable that when they did a renovation to the Astrodome in the 1980s were basically the decade of upgrades for the Astrodome. Lots of different renovations that went on to bring it up to modern standards at that time. And part of that was the seating color changes. And the upper deck, which had for years been known as the gold level, it was a gold and bronze combination. Became the rainbow level, and that's where the rainbow level was born. After the rainbow uniforms had been around for a little bit, and then the shoulder rainbow was there in the early 80s. By the time they got to 1984, which is when they began overhauling and reupholstering the seats using the same chair, the same seat pans from 1965, but they just reupholstered them like 3,000 at a time. It took several months to do it. And so the dome actually took the look of what the team was wearing on the field because of that. And so that just kind of stayed there. And of course, that look, with the H and the star on the hat, the orange star, and then of course, the variation with the navy star on an orange hat, with the white H on it, that remained there for many, many years. And it wasn't until Drayton McLane bought the team. And again, we have another example of with an ownership change, the owner wants to do something different. And originally the designs for what were going to be the new uniforms of the Astros involved orange and navy, and they were different takes of how you could use orange and navy, or it was clear that they were going to go away from the rainbow because that was kind of a different era. And Drayton McLane felt that this was a new beginning for the team. And so things would be familiar, but it wouldn't necessarily just continue on the look that they had for many years. And so they went to the gold and midnight blue. But originally they were actually looking at that same font with that shooting star. They were looking at that in like a metallic, almost like a bronze or an orange. They were looking to see how well that would adapt into just using a new font. But they decided to go ahead and go against what would be when you look up at the sky at night, you don't see a navy colored sky. You see almost like a midnight blue. And so that's what they were looking for, was the color of a night sky, and then having the shooting star against that.
Yeah.
And then of course, that turned out to be a relatively short-lived uniform, because the team started building Minute Maid Park in the late 90s, and in 1997 they broke ground on the new ballpark downtown, and then 98 and 99 it was under construction, and so it was they didn't want to carry that look. The gold and the midnight blue actually turned out to be what I thought was a pretty good look for the time.
I loved it. Yeah,
in the 90s.
I was into it. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was really sharp. I remember when the uniforms came out, I kind of wished it had the orange in it, or had a trim of it at least, or something that kind of looked like it was linked to the years before. But I thought it was really sharp, but they didn't want to carry that over to the new ballpark. And by 1999, I was working for the team at that time, and I remember hearing some of the rumors early on as to what the uniforms were going to look like, and some of us internally were talking about some of the things that we had kind of heard about, and then I got to see a swatch, kind of a style guide of what the uniforms were going to look like, and indeed they were going to be pinstripe, and we were going to have red, and like a brick red, and black was going to be part of that, and then the star was going to be a modified version of what we saw with the gold star with the open end. It just wasn't going to have as long of a tail on it. So, excuse me. And then, of course, that stayed along for a long time. The pinstripe in that era actually was around about as long, or just as long, as the rainbow uniform.
That's
and
yeah.
That kind of that's kind of shocking to people sometimes, because they think of the rainbow uniform as being the uniform of the Astros, or kind of the heyday of the Astros. But in essence, from 2000 to 2012, there was a pinstripe uniform there. And it became the first uniform to be worn in a World Series by the Astros as well. So it had some history. It was kind of an odd time. I remember when we moved to Minute Maid Park and showing up at the new park, and the actual move it took place about 10 days before the first exhibition game.
Wow.
And so it was. They were still trying to finish the park. They had a lot of finishing work. The punch list was rather long, and they were trying to get a lot of things done. I remember walking into Union Station, and you could smell the fresh paint. The furniture, the office furniture, had plastic covers. We pulled the covers off. We were the first people to sit in those chairs, and computers were brought in, and the offices were set, and this and that. So it was kind of a unique time, because it felt in a way like we had moved from a decent neighborhood to like River Oaks. Now
Right.
we were in a whole different neighborhood, but it kind of felt like we had kind of pushed aside some of the looks of the past, because you didn't see the rainbow stuff anymore. And even when you walked inside, what was in Enron Field in the first couple of years there, you also didn't really see any sign of who played there. Like, you didn't. There was a logo. There was a big sign above the original video board in center field, but it was pretty high up, and it didn't show up on TV a lot. But there were no real Astro logos throughout Enron Field when you first got there. It was just the colors. The colors of the ballpark were more prevalent. What they call river water sea green or something like that. It's kind of a light green, kind of a cool light green, which is the color of the steel. And then the brickwork, you saw a lot of tans and browns and kind of brick reds. They were kind of the colors of the franchise came from the appearance of Union Station. And so, you know, the limestone, the black came from the smoke of the old trains that, you know, that used to come through there, or so they said. I always thought that a steam train had kind of a white steam, you know, but I'm guessing the coal trains, you know, had black smoke. But anyway, the colors went away from the idea of what the Astros were. In my mind for a while, but they, you know, after a few years and you get to the World Series and then people start seeing that as an identity, and then you get a new group of people who actually grow up with that look.
Yeah.
But then, yeah. But then in 2013, when Jim Crane buys the team, and again another example of with a new owner of the team. You know, he's a Houstonian, and the group that owns the Astros are, you know, almost all of them are from Houston, and so they understand and grew up with the Astros, and they wanted something that they really wanted to take it internally and see something that was redeveloped that really meant Houston Astros, and so that's it was very clear and simple when we had a process internally and start to begin to look at old uniforms and what might work and kind of take a survey internally what we thought we might want to see. It was very quick, where people were saying we wanted a star on the hat where the H was on top of it once again, and we wanted to try to go back to orange and navy. And what came out, the study that was done with Major League Baseball, first off, one of the finalists was kind of a recoloring of the script logo of the brick red and pinstripe era.
Sure, yeah.
Where we wouldn't necessarily have the pinstripes, but you would still have the same font, the same type of star, and we would just use, you know, white, navy, and orange. Again, see how that worked. Kind of like they did in the 90s before the Gold Star stuff. And then there was another one where it was very, very futuristic. And the only memory that I have of it was it had a lot of sharp angles on it. It had what kind of looked like it was really, really different. And that's kind of what you want to do during a process like this, where you want to see the different extremes. You want to see, you know, not just middle of the road stuff, but you want to see the extremes so you can really compare and really narrow down what you like. And the other option is what you see today, what the Astros wear today. And that's what we wound up going with. Something that was traditional, something that was based in team history and kind of what I was talking about in the groups that I was involved in, the DNA of the Houston Astros.
I will tell you, you know, I'm a filmmaker by profession, and so the red and black look always almost look generic. Like when you're watching a sitcom and they're drinking beer, but they're not drinking Budweiser. It was like looking at baseball teams, not the Astros. But there was a part of me that just when I saw that rainbow come back in the H star and all of that, just felt like home again. So, I mean, I guess we'll put you on the spot then as we wrap up. What is your favorite all-time Astros uniform look?
My all-time favorite is actually the shooting star. I love the look of it, and I get very technical in the construction of how the uniforms, how a logo translates to construction of a uniform. And what I mean by that is the original shooting star uniform had what's called chain stitching. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like a loop chain. It's a very, very nice, elaborate embroidery. So it's not like looking at a hat, you know, like if you look at your hat and you see the threads and how they're embroidered on your hat, it's a lot. If you go on Google and look up chain stitching, you'll see that it's a very, very nice embroidery. It's a very elegant looking type of thing. I think maybe the Cardinals still use it. At the time that we went to the pinstripes in 2000, in 2002, we went to chain stitching, and we were one of the very few teams, one of like maybe 4 teams that was using it at the time, and we actually briefly considered it for the current uniforms, but felt that it was just going to add too much weight to the front of the uniform, because it you know, it's a lot of thread and it sometimes adds a little bit more weight. But if you've ever seen those old varsity type of jackets, where the patch is on the back or the patch on the sleeves, the kids wear, something kind of like that, but not as thick. It's a very, very cool look. I really love the way. I actually own a couple of those uniforms, original uniforms from the 60s in a private collection, and I just love the way it looks. That said, I really love the rainbow uniforms too, just because that's what I grew up with. But as a favorite, it has to be the shooting star.
If I could have my way, I would have Jim Crane just basically 5 days. We rotate every 5 days, rainbows, blue and gold, shooting star, and then the orange.
Yeah, and that's been talked about. It's kind of like you've seen some other teams go to a what has been a retro uniform, and they kind of make it part of their style guide, and they're wearing it on, say, Fridays or Saturdays. But it's also, if you do that, then it kind of loses the mystique a little bit. It kind of like, okay, well, it becomes every day, and then what's going to happen? Are people going to become tired of it again? Is ownership going to be, and it's going to disappear? Or some. I mean, it's been a proven revenue generator. The rainbow uniform was like the most popular retro jersey that was being produced for many, many years. I'm not sure if it still is, but it's always been very popular. So, if you want to keep some sort of value on it, so you do want to have those days. And we actually last year, with the weird season that we had, we had like 5 or 6 dates where we were going to have some very, very unique, throwback games. And I was part of that selection in which uniforms we should use. And I was pushing for some things that, we had never really worn before on the field, since the days of those uniforms. And so I was looking at wearing the black alternate from the 2000s and the zipper front shooting star jersey from the early 70s, right before. So things like that, and some new things to bring. The alternate midnight blue Sunday uniform from the last years in the Astrodome. And that was part of that too. But anyway, it just didn't happen, and we'll see if that happens in the future again. But that was the one thing about the 2020 season that I was pretty disappointed in, because we weren't going to have anybody there to really see them, and so
I had
it had been the same activity.
I had tickets for all the jersey giveaways from that season. Like I had already had them.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I was ready. Before we let you go, do you think we'll see a refresh anytime soon of the? I know that Nike just took over, and some teams have been kind of gotten a little bit different look. Anything that you know of, or
I mean, I think we're always looking. The Astros are always looking to keep things fresh, but I think that there's a good amount of feeling to keep things consistent. And I think that with last year's uniform in 2020 was pretty much the same uniform that we had seen before with Majestic, except it had the Nike logo on it. It was same basic construction, but I think Nike is going to look at a different type of construction of uniform in the coming years. And so we might see some modifications, kind of like we did with introducing the new Sunday with the rainbow panels on the side. That was a project that I worked really close on to bring to the field. You might see some small things. I don't know. You never can tell. But now I would probably say no. There's not anything really drastic right now. But I think that there's some fun stuff that will be in addition to the normal uniforms. I think that won't go away. In fact, I think that'll just I mean, I can't say too much, but I think that there's some things down the line that hopefully the fans will really enjoy, because I think it would be cool.
Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for being on Let's Get To. I hope everybody follows you, because you're one of my favorite Twitter follows. Have a great New Year, and we can't wait to get everybody back to the ballpark.
Yeah, hopefully we can see people this year at the ballpark, and I appreciate you having me on, and thank you for your service, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.
The Austin Revolution Film Festival presents Let's Get to Extra Innings, short films from Twitchy Dolphin Flicks.
So it was 72 degrees when I went to pitch the other day. The problem is today it's only 7 in the shade. So what am I going to do? Sit on my duff and watch the 17 World Series on Blu-ray? No. I'm about to have an aggressive altercation with that snow out there with this ball right here. Pitter patter, batter up. Hey Jess, I'm going out to work on my pitching.
You'll freeze to death before you finish your third throw.
Then I'll see you in hell. I can't be the guy who misses the mound because he couldn't practice because his ball got lost in the snow. What kind of bush league, amateur hour, not ready for prime time kind of BS would that be? If you can dodge a wrench, you can find a ball in the snow that doesn't fit. The problem with playing with a baseball in the snow is that the ball is white and the snow is white. And so if you lose one in the snow, you don't know where you're going to go to find it. You're going to go to places you've never seen, both in the snow and in your own mind. And I had to go after it because it's the last ball. The dogs ate all the other ones. Literally, they ate all the other ones. I went places, man. I went places. I met a manatee. I think his name was Julian. We didn't exchange pleasantries. He looked a little chilly. But that's where I went, man. And I found the ball, but I think this whole thing is going to be much harder than I thought. And the last time I recorded practicing for the first pitch, I said this. And I'm back with you out at our beautiful park. And listen, I'm not going to try to brag or make the Hitter Sports or Andrew Nelson feel any worse than they already feel, but it is like February 5th we're recording this, and it's 72 degrees, baby. This is why I text this. And so I'd like to apologize to the Hitter Sports and Andrew Nelson. I promise never to make fun of their winter weather ever again.
And now, on to close it out, the right-hander from Houston, Texas, James Christopher.
So that does wrap up this episode of Let's Get To. And I do want to do a really quick shout out to Alex, a guy it's always weird. I don't always know last names, and then a lot of times I don't want to know their names because of how they handle Twitter. But Alex is a really good guy, Yankee fan, sent me a sweet Pizza Rats hat that I posted when I got it. But he also sent me a bunch of baseball cards, and in a note said, "Don't eat the gum." And I noticed that they were a lot of minor league cards, first of all, but like Topps cards from 1990. And I'm not going to eat the gum, Alex, but I thought I would at least on camera see what happens, like a science experiment, to 32 or 31-year-old gum. So I'm unwrapping this pack. So first, we'll go through and see what winners we have. Oh man, these bring me back. I was never a big baseball card guy. I wonder if the Hitter Sports and Alex remember old Jimmy Jones pitching for the Yankees. Hey, Eric Anthony. Andy, we all thought he was going to be amazing. He wasn't. Still, those uniforms, those batting practice, spring training, blue with the rainbow shoulders, might be the best. Let's see. Oh, got an Ozzie Smith. Nice. Let's see. Tony Fernandez. Denny Martinez with maybe one of the best mustaches in the history of baseball. But what we were aiming for, the gum. Now, the gum in a Topps pack was never great, right? It never honestly was what you would, like, if you wanted some gum, you wouldn't just go to your Topps pack. And for as much as Kevin Costner says in For Love of the Game, they buy them for the gum, they don't. This is what happens to baseball gum after 31 years in a wax pack. Wow, that's fun. It kind of sounds like I'm Catholic, so it sounds like when Father's doing the communion, you can hear the break of the communion wafer. So it's kind of the vibe you get anyway. But thanks again, Alex, for the cap and all the cards. I can't wait to kind of unwrap them every once in a while. I think I'm going to open a pack when I need to feel good about the world. We do have a production note. We will not have an episode next week. I'm actually going to produce our St. Patrick's Day episode next week. And so then we're going to have sort of a week off. I'll get everything shot and recorded. But then we'll be back for St. Patrick's Day. We have a lot of fun. I do think we got to stay safe and stay strong. I always end the show by saying stay safe, stay sane. Well, at least I have during the pandemic. And, I got to tell you, getting the vaccine and feeling that kind of weight come off, I can't express how it felt. And knowing that Jessica also is protected felt even better. And so I think we're getting there. All we got to do is stay together, and I'll figure out a new way to end the show later on. But for now, stay safe, stay sane, and let's get to.